You're probably thinking I'm going to tell you all to stop being on your phones during games of Magic, and I am going to say that, but that's not quite what this video is about. I saw this question on Reddit: is someone allowed to use Scryfall at FNM Draft? And I found the question interesting. Of course, the answer is yes. You can open up Scryfall, you can have a look at Scryfall on your phone. Hell, it's only FNM. But wait till you read the full thing. I thought that was the funny part, that the opponent was basically trying to be a bit of a cyborg mid-draft. If you are looking to pick up cards, single or sealed product from Aetherdrift, CoolStuffInc.com has got you covered in the North American Peninsula. Use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order, and it helps support the show, and you get one of these playtest cards. The thread read like this: someone was on Scryfall during a casual FNM draft. Opponent felt uncomfortable since it felt like a strategic disadvantage. Scryfall guys, they're calling MCs, opened green and black, searched on Scryfall for any potential instant speed stuff for that CMC. So during the match, they said their opponent has open mana and decides to check what cards they could potentially have in those colors and for that mana on Scryfall. Scryfall guys' argument was that he does it all the time on Magic the Gathering Online and Magic the Gathering Arena, and including the Arena Open, which involves money. He says he doesn't know the set very well and doesn't want to lose to ignorance. It's casual FNM and people on their phones all the time, and that he plays fast. That's a lot of excuses to make. Okay, look, basically, long story short is you can't fucking do this. And that's for two reasons, essentially. So one, you can look on Scryfall and you can use digital things like your phone. They updated this stuff. Once upon a time, you couldn't use a digital device whilst in a game of Magic, and that has long since changed. I'm not really sure when the change came in, but it was well over 5 years ago. The official rule is as follows: electronic devices are permitted. Players may not use them to access information that contains substantial strategic advice. With MTG Companion app, Wizards has finally had to open up its electronics policy. Mobile devices are a fact of life now. We can only mitigate what they are used for. So if you're playing a foreign card, or it's a card your opponent might have that you want to look up the information for, you can look it up on Scryfall FNM. The reality is, like a comp event, you call a judge and ask them for, even away from the table, what does X card do? Or what does Y card do? You think your opponent's got, I always got a Cryptic Command, but no one fucking plays Cryptic Command anymore. But you think your opponent's got Cryptic Command, call a judge over and ask them to give you the Gatherer text for Cryptic Command. But that's the rules text or Gatherer text for a card. As the rule states, any significant strategic advice is not allowed. And I think having a list of all combat tricks for a certain color pairing and CMC would count as significant strategic advice. This is not okay and not to be done. Now, this is casual FNM, of course, but let's be real, if everyone was on their phones, it would fuck the entire thing up. The idea that you could every turn search to see what your opponent's next cards could be in order to play around them at 2 mana, at 3 mana, at 4 mana in their colors on Scryfall is ludicrous. The extra time added for that it doesn't matter if you play fast, it's a stupid way of looking at the game. Now, there's this interesting point about that he does it on Magic the Gathering Online and Magic the Gathering Arena. It's a fact of life that people now use 2 monitors or 3 monitors, or maybe you're a Bond villain and you need 24 monitors all showing your favorite henchman's face as a portrait. And that allows people to have access to data on the other side of the screen. They can have matchup win percentages, sideboarding guides, Scryfall searches. Hell, sometimes you can Google someone's name and get their deck list if they're playing a known entity and have played it in tournaments before. Hell, on rare occasion, you can find someone like myself is streaming and just stream snipe me. I've had it done to me, and I'm not a massive tournament player. Other people have this problem too. Does that mean you should do this in a match at FNM? Fuck no. I mean, most of the things I just mentioned before have some morality conversations to be had around them, but unfortunately some of them, like for example having Scryfall or matchup guides or sideboard notes or whatever on screen during the match, which often is not allowed in competitive Magic, that's just a necessary evil and part of the online version of Magic. You kind of have to expect it and accept it because there isn't a realistic alternative. That's why paper Magic's so good, because you don't have to have that stuff during a paper match. And this is the bit that really made me want to make the video. He doesn't know the set well and doesn't want to lose from ignorance. Well, in which case, do your fucking homework then. Part of being good at Magic, in constructed or limited, is understanding the game pieces that could be played, the interactions between them, and thusly combining all those things, the meta game. In constructed, it helps to know what your openers should be against certain matchups if you know what your opponent might be on through, extra information like, you know the opponent. People often know I'm on Death and Taxes, for example. You want to know which cards to keep post-board in the second matchup, in the second game of the match, for example. So if you're into Storm, you've sideboarded out your removal spells, you're looking for your Thalias, for example. There's all these things that you get through through reps and homework and doing the work to get better at Magic. And Limited in many ways exaggerates those things. I think that those things are actually a lot stronger and constructed than a lot of players realize. It's not a case of just buying the best deck and slammer jamming it. You often need to put the reps in and understand the meta game and the matchups. A lot of players don't understand that and will claim that Magic is just, pay to win. It's normally the players that are really bad at the game that will claim that. But Limited, wowee, you need to understand during the draft portion whether an X1 or an X2 is valuable in the format. Is there a lot of cards that do 1 damage incidentally or 2 damage, meaning the value that you put on a 1, 2, or 3 toughness creature might differ or change? In some formats, a 3/4 might be really good because there's just a plethora of 3/3s out there, and a 3/4 blocks it really well. Combat tricks, removal, counter spells, all sorts of things you can do with certain mana. That Limited rewards you for, again, doing the homework. I get that we live in a world where we're all becoming transhuman. We are all going beyond what it is just to be a biological creature, and we actually have the technology injected into our fucking veins, right? Well, metaphorically, we're very close to that, I guess. Right now, I have notes on one screen, I have Google searches and eBay open on another. I've got a phone in my hand that has access to all of human knowledge, and it will be garbled up and given to me in an AI response on Google. That'll be wrong. In essence, the argument is through the constant use of technology, especially amounts to a supercomputer in your pocket, mankind is no longer the individual having to know how to cook a fish or start a fire. You can find all that information via Google. However, in competition, that's not how that works, right? You shouldn't have outside influence like a fucking vibrating butt plug up your arse during a game of chess to tell you what moves to make. When you're cooking on a MasterChef, you shouldn't be reading the fucking recipes off your phone. You should know what you're doing, both fundamentals and in depth. And in some things, you are allowed to access outside notes. Some sports, you'll have your team in your ear feeding you information. And hell, I don't even know if it's against the rules in MasterChef to read a cookbook, but it makes you look worse and it will slow you down too. And that goes back to that first point of if everyone was doing this with Scryfall on a Google lens in their eye, that would help them to be less ignorant and less losses from said ignorance. But it'd lead to a shitter environment. You can't stop people being on their phones at FNM, but it's not ideal, right? And that comes to my closing, more condescending point, I guess. I do think people should be on their phones less. There is a value in tabletop gaming, whether it be Magic the Gathering like this, or I play a lot of Warhammer too. There's a really cool, almost flow state that you get into during a deeply strategic game where you're thinking about your play, your next play, and what your opponent's doing, whilst also recalling rules and interactions that you can utilize to inform those decisions or actualize those decisions. Actualize those decisions. My God, it's difficult to speak when you've got a garbled mouth like me. And I think there's value in that. To sound like an old man, even though my entire job is social media and I play Magic almost exclusively via digital the vast majority of the time, I do think there is value in getting away from just obsessing over a screen. There is value in interacting with another human being. There's value in using your brain to recall information that you aren't getting off of a fucking spreadsheet, a search engine, or from an algorithm that, not in the case of Scryfall, but in the case of Google, for example, could be wrong. I might do a separate video on this, but recently we had a ruling call at a Warhammer event I was at, and my opponent Googled it while the TO was called to have a look at the official rules, and the opponent started reading some AI response from Google out loud that I had to tell them, sorry, I think that's actually wrong. That's 3 editions of Warhammer out of date. It's just collated information from 3 or 4 different pages and gave us an absolute garbled fuckery of a message. I'm not saying technology is not reliable. I'm saying Google is still a useful tool when you get away from the shitification of the internet that sits at the top of the page. And Scryfall is fantastic. It's one of my favorite resources in all of Magic. But what I am saying is that paper Magic should push you to exercise that away from technology abilities that you have. If anything, these things are here to help us use the fucking grey matter inside our heads. And to that extent, I will further say that social interaction and being present in the game is also good. So whilst I'm not going to point to someone at FNM and tell them to get off their fucking phone, I will say that it bugs the shit out of me to see people on their phones during a game of Commander. And Commander's not even a competitive endeavor. I'm just saying, being absent and then getting to your turn and not knowing what you're doing, it boils my piss. So get off your fucking phone. Pay attention to your opponent and what they're doing. Don't worry about getting caught out by a combat trick you don't know. And also pay attention to the fucking board state and plan your turns ahead. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet, with this really important public service announcement off the back of a point that I thought was interesting. Let me know what you think of phone usage during a game of Magic at your local store, or higher, at competitive level perhaps, in the comment section below. And don't forget coolstuffinc.com or Patreon, link down below if you want to help support the show. And I'll see you in the next one, probably tomorrow. Aether Drift previews. My goodness, hasn't been long since the last set came out, right? Oh no, wait, Innistrad Remastered isn't out yet, and Aether Drift's about to start. Thanks for watching. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.